MSW Melbourne says, do you think this administration can actually enforce the executive order on gun control? I have something to say about that executive order on gun control because, look, again, I didn't really read the details of it. But let's just say for the sake of the argument that it's a background check and waiting period, because that's kind of what I want to talk about more than anything, really. In other words, let's say that that the executive order was going to apply California standards to the rest of the country. I don't know if that's what it says, but it's something like that. It's not. I was listening to it and I was expecting, hey, we're coming to take your guns, and he didn't say that. He was talking about background checks and talking about, sort of a more of a database kind of thing and so on. So here's what's interesting about that. I live in California. I bought an AR-15 out here, and I bought my 45 sidearm out here, my 45 ACP out here. And both times I had to undergo a background check, and both times I had to go through a 10-day waiting period. And here's what's interesting for me about that question. What's interesting is I don't really consider either of those things to be unreasonable. But after I had that thought, I realized it doesn't matter whether it's unreasonable or not. It's the only thing that matters is it constitutional or not? Is it legal or not? And I don't think it is legal. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and anything that gets in the way of that is infringing your right. You don't have to have a background check for speech, and you don't have to have a 10-day waiting period for speech so that you don't say something hateful. Once again, the reason you need to get into the essence of what this is about is the understanding that the Constitution, that was the operations manager, Carla, everybody. So she's helping me get ready for my nephew's arrival. She's been working all day on that. And she's probably interacted with some of you before. She's a lovely person, and I know everybody out there who's talked to her was just terrific, but that's who that was. And you may see her again. Undoubtedly you will. So anyway, the thing about the Second Amendment right is, while I don't have a particular problem with the waiting period, and I don't have a particular problem with the background check. On some level, you have to do a background check because felons are prohibited from owning guns. But with that said, that's not the point. It's not a question of it being reasonable. The question is the right to it predates the Constitution. The right to it is inherent, and it cannot be infringed. So while I may think that those kind of things are relatively reasonable, and I'm certainly willing to put up with them, that's not a reflection of me being squishy on the subject, because the fact of the matter is rather that you have a pre-existing right to self-defense that shall not be abridged by the government, and anything they do to infringe upon it is a violation of your existing rights. So there's that. As far as him being able to enforce the look, what he did and what he said, he started this thing before we got the waterworks and before we got the tremendous sadness, he admitted that these things wouldn't have had any effect, and basically when you come out and say, look, we're going to, every time I think about those kids at Sandy Hook, it just makes me so angry. And now we're going to enforce a law through executive order completely illegally that would have done nothing to prevent the occurrence at Sandy Hook. So that's kind of where we are these days, right? It's the theater. It's the theater of the progressive presidency. I'm not the first person to come up with this. I saw a great analysis of this the other day. It basically said, when he's interviewing with Chris Matthews, it's like President Obama is playing the role of the heroic progressive president, stymied at every turn by these mean-spirited, conservatives. And when I was talking with Stefan Milieu earlier today, I basically said, yeah, you could just see it on his face. And this is the story that the progressives are telling about him, and it's more importantly, it's the story he tells himself. And that story is this: watching Obama at that press conference, I just kept thinking, what a shame that we're not a better country for him. It's got to be just awful to be Obama, or especially for the fans of Obama, to see a man with that kind of wisdom and that kind of sensitivity and that kind of heart, that kind of deep, deep soul, and forget the deep, deep soul, the brilliant mind behind it, the sensitivity and the ability to see all different sides of things, and to have a man that brilliant be saddled with a country and a citizenry so primitive and so violent and so racist and so unpleasant in every way. It's got to be hard on the guy. They would make me cry if I was him, certainly. You watch him and you listen to the way people talk about him. It's like, if only the president had a better country. And that, I would certainly be crying if I was him too. If only we had a country that could live up to the awesomeness of Obama and the justice of the guy and the caring, especially the caring, more than anything, the caring. If only we had a country that cared as much as he did and had the wisdom that he did to see what simple common sense measures we could take to significantly reduce the amount of gun violence in America, like the one which we just illegally signed into law that won't have any impact on anything. Now, we just opened the statement by saying it wouldn't have any impact on anything. Certainly wouldn't have had any impact on the thing I'm crying about, but that doesn't mean we're not going to cry, because it's not about this is the thing. It's not about the law. It's not about gun violence. It's not about saving lives. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about, how does the president look? What are the optics of Barack Obama at the moment? He's been savage lately because he's been so weak on this terrorism thing. People are buying guns to defend themselves. That really upsets him. It must upset him that he's the greatest gun salesman in the history of the world. I talked to a friend of mine who's a Marine, and he said, if you bought Smith & Wesson stock at the beginning of his administration, you sold it now, you'd be a very, very wealthy person. So that's got to bother him. He knows on some level, I'm sure he believes that this has some good. I'm sure these progressives actually believe this nonsense that you can control the murder rate by controlling the gun rate. But it's got to bother him that he's sold more guns than anybody else. So the main thing is, really, since these laws aren't going to have any effect, since they admit that they're not going to have any effect, and since everybody knows they're not going to have any effect, why are we doing it? Well, we're doing it because we have to be seen to be doing something. You see, our progressive base wants those guns controlled to get the murder rate down. And in the fact that controlling the guns is impossible, and the idea that controlling the guns to get the murder rate down is not only impossible, is just, it's not only counterintuitive, it's not backed by evidence. In fact, on the contrary, there's plenty of evidence that says it's just the exact opposite. So he has to cry. And the second I saw him crying, I was at PJTV taping Trifecta, and I looked up and I saw him wiping the tears away, and I just said in front of everybody, I just looked up in there and said, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I'm sorry. I don't believe you. It's stagecraft. And that's what it is. It's just simple stagecraft. It's showing his hardcore base that I just care so much. Why am I constrained by these horrible citizens of this country I live in? And I noticed that nobody mentioned, that he didn't mention, in our big effort to control guns and in order to have the background checks to stop the murder rate, I noticed he didn't mention that they were murder rate capital of the country is his own state, his own city. His own city is where more people are murdered than anywhere else in this country on a total number basis. It's his policies in gun control places like Baltimore and New Orleans and all the rest where the murders are. And I got to tell you something. I'm a little tired. I don't generally find myself to be susceptible to what Europeans think, but I don't like the fact that Europeans think they can't set foot into this country without being murdered when they go to, drive down the freeway or something. I'm getting a little tired of the fact that these murders in these crime-ridden urban areas that are the domain of Democrats is giving this country such a god-awful reputation. If you take the murder rate of this country is due to the murder rate in Chicago, Baltimore, New Orleans, Washington, D.C. That's what makes this country so bloody dangerous, and it's basically black male criminals killing other black male criminals. And we all have to pay the price, not only for it in terms of the crime we have to endure, but for the idea that America is this giant murder capital. I noticed the president, and I noticed Hillary Clinton, and I noticed Joe Biden, very serious Joe Biden, who can't stand to bear think about this tragedy. It's such a big tragedy. He's regretting that he got into the office every day. So I'm tired of my country paying the price in terms of reputation for the fact that these Democrats are trying to control guns among honest citizens, while the murder rate is, in fact, being driven by inner-city murders. You don't like it? I'm sorry to hear it, but that's the truth. Baltimore, these murder rates of 50 people per 100,000 or something like that. It's just awful. And So they go after the guns and the law-abiding citizens in order to deflect the fact that people don't want to be talking about, well, where are these murders committed, who commits them, and so on. Somebody's asked me 6 times to show me their EDC. I have no idea what EDC is, Mr. Calzone. I just don't know. So if you want to tell me what an EDC is and you want me to show it to you, I'll be happy to once I figure out what it is. So anyway, the performance was just awful. It was embarrassing to me, and especially embarrassing to me because I know the effect that it must have had about his thank you, everyday carry. It must have had a huge effect on the 20% of the population that still believes in this guy. It's not even theater; it's kabuki. It's mask theater. It's a theater of masks and the theater of these ritualized gestures. And here's a law that won't have any effect. And I'm going to show everybody how deeply, deeply hurt I am by this. I don't have an EDC permit. I live in California. So let's just get that out of the way. The Second Amendment doesn't apply to me the way that applies to you. It applies to me 20-30% the way it applies to other people. There is no EDC in California. I could be the mayor of the city. I probably couldn't get an EDC. I could get armed bodyguards to defend me. That wouldn't be hard at all. But I don't have everyday carry. Is this a concealed carry permit? I guess that's what it is. I don't have one. Or open carry permit? I don't have one of those either. And I'm not going to get one. And I'm not going to get one because I live in California. And it's just not going to happen. So, there you go. That's just the way it is out here. And that's a price that I'm willing to pay to be here underneath the red eye of Mordor here underneath the volcanoes. So I saw that after the January 1st that the in Texas I see people just guns strapped on their hips going shopping. I think it's awesome. And once again, look, I don't particularly want to live in a country where everybody has to have a gun strapped to their hips. It wasn't like that in the 50s and the early 60s. It wasn't like that in the 40s. And the reason that not everybody had a gun strapped to their belt was because we hadn't had liberal crime policies yet. The reason that the liberals are out of their minds by people carrying guns in public is because we had 50 years of liberal crime policy. We didn't have to carry guns before. We didn't have to worry about getting shot before so much because back prior to the 60s, if somebody was murdering people in downtown, they'd be arrested and thrown in jail and prosecuted. And if it could be proven that they'd murdered the guy, he'd get the electric chair. And that was basically it. So the reason that everybody runs around armed now is not because conservatives want to run around armed. The reason that people run around armed now is because of liberals, because the liberals will not punish crime. And they'll punish the people who are the victims of crime. Somebody breaks into your house. Yes, what did you do? Well, I shot him. Well, you're going to go to prison, and the guy you shot, turns out he survived, and he's going to sue you, and he's going to win $10 million settlement because he broke into your house in the middle of the night and you shot him. So you go to jail, and he goes to some mansion someplace. And when you have these kind of policies, what you get is when you support the criminals and you suppress the honest citizens, you get more criminals and fewer honest citizens. And so when that happens, everybody's got to ammo up because these damn liberals have made this country so crime-ridden and crime and murder are so tolerated that, of course, we have to defend ourselves. Of course we do. What is it, 1,000 murders in Chicago? We know where these murders are being committed, and we know where they're being committed, we know who they're being committed by, and we know upon whom they're being committed. The Black Lives Matter thing, you can actually immediately dismiss the Black Lives Matter movement out of hand like that because the number one murder of black people is other black people with guns, and the number of police that shoot unarmed black people has got to be a small fraction of probably 1% of the total murders committed against black people. And if Black Lives Matter really wanted to get down to the issue of actually worrying about black lives, they would take a serious look at who's doing the murdering of most black people, and the answer is other black people. So I'm not impressed by this Black Lives Matter crowd talking about the fact that maybe 2 shootings a year are iffy, or that's not to say there aren't bad cops out there. There aren't to say that there aren't. I've seen some cases that were just simply shocking in terms of, I think that policeman just murdered that guy. And that's a word I use pretty carefully. But there are 1 or 2. And all the rest of this agitation is political intimidation. It's the Democratic Party's essay. It's their stormtroopers. And basically what they're saying is, give us what we want, or else, the cities are going to catch fire. And I'm tired of being blackmailed by these people. I've had enough of it. I'm done with it. So, Black Lives Matter, you want to be about saving black lives? Start looking at who's killing black people, who's taking black lives predominantly in this country, percentage-wise, 80%, something like that. Who is it? Oh, turns out it's other black people. Well, when you decide to address that first, when you decide to address the 80% problem, and then the other 10% problem, and then the 6% problem, and you finally get down to the 3 or 4% problem, I'll take you seriously. But until then, I don't. And this idea that a black kid can't walk through the streets of white America without being assassinated, we can test this theory, We can test this theory. We can send a black kid through a white neighborhood at 2 o'clock in the morning, or we can send a white girl through a black neighborhood at 2 o'clock in the morning. One or the other. Take a black woman, march her down the street in a miniskirt in the heart of Beverly Hills, let's say, or Simi Valley, and see if she's assassinated by a policeman. Then take a white woman and send her through the streets of Compton or Chicago or New Orleans or Washington, D.C., and we'll see. We get some data. We'll find out which one is the actual truth. And I don't think we have to do that experiment, because I think everybody knows, we know, they know what the truth of this is. I'm tired of being told that things are true that are not true. I'm tired of it, and I'm not going to put up with it anymore. That's why we're here. We're here to come out and say it. It's not that black people can't walk through the streets of white America in this country. There's just many, many parts of black America that white Americans can't walk through without being murdered. And everybody knows it's true, and everybody on the left pretends that it isn't. And this is why the world is where the world is. So, somebody who's saying your first Stratosphere Lounge, get rid of the ads. The ads interrupting you are built into Ustream. I can't do anything about that. But you can get ad block, either for your Chrome browser or your Firefox browser, and I suppose they've got it for Safari now. If you want to just go ahead and install ad block before the next show, or install it now, come back and just reload the page, and the ads will be gone. Yeah, that's it for the gun thing.